Moving on to our next guest speaker. Ady Mor Biran is a multidisciplinary strategy and marketing professional with 20 years of managerial experience in the IT and software industries. Currently, Ady holds the position of the GTM Lead in Microsoft Israel. In addition, Ady is a noted public speaker and a spoken word poet. Woo, good for you, spoken word. As a mother of 2 sons, one of whom is on the autistic spectrum, Ady is a vocal advocate for diversity and inclusion in the workforce and the community. So Ady, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
It's a great having you. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, they do.
Excellent, fabulous. Thank you for that introduction, Benny. It's always weird to hear somebody else introducing you in that way. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can share the great presentation that I have ready for you today. And that's just going to take a second there. And here we are, hit refresh. So first of all, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's great to be here at N-Gage, and thank you, Benny, for inviting me, and thank you for that great introduction. My name, as you said, is Ady Mor Biran, and I'm a marketing lead, a go-to-market lead at Microsoft, where I'm responsible for software vendors and startups. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. I will be talking about the transformation journey that Microsoft has gone through over the past few years. And specifically, I'm going to look at perspectives of the employee and of my own personal perspective within that transformation. And we have about 25 minutes for the session, which is one that I normally do in an hour. So I've briefed it down, and I hope we can cover everything today. So let's start at the very beginning. Back in the day, 1975, 2 young men started this company called Microsoft in a garage. And their mission was very audacious. They set out to have a PC on every desk in the world. At the time, that seemed impossible. Today, that's history. Almost every desk does have a PC or a laptop on it. And that was the mission that was set up when Microsoft was established, and it's still core to Microsoft's mission today. And many years afterwards, Microsoft has gone through a big change. And in fact, in 2014, circa February, Microsoft named its 3rd CEO, and that's the gentleman that you see on your screen right now. That's Satya Nadella. And Satya did something very, very unique. And he said, we're going to restart this company. This company has nothing to complain about. We're doing good. Business is okay. The stock is doing well. We have loyal customers, but we need to rethink our purpose. We need to rethink our mission. We need to refine or understand our soul, which is a strange word for a CEO to use, to refine our soul. And that's what he set out to do. And, you know, I was thinking about all this and something came to mind. And before I tell you about the analogy I had, I'll tell you something about myself. I celebrated 40 a couple of years ago. And like many 40 years old, I went through kind of a midlife crisis. And what happens in a midlife crisis, according to the Wikipedia definition that you see here, but according to our life experience in general, is we reevaluate our life. We rethink our relationships. I personally got divorced. We rethink our priorities in our career. I moved into Microsoft. We rethink our goals and our dreams, and we set out to fulfill those dreams because time's running out. That's when I started doing spoken word and poetry that Benny was talking about. So that midlife crisis is a point in time where we rethink our lives. And then this suddenly hit me. Microsoft went through a midlife crisis. Satya Nadella was made CEO exactly when Microsoft celebrated 40. So they he reevaluated the relationships that Microsoft had, reevaluated the mission, reevaluated and wanted to make the dreams come true. So we set out, and Satya was our navigator through that midlife crisis, if you will. And I know all this, not because I've met Satya personally, not yet, but because I'm a Microsoft employee for the past 3 years, but also because I've read this book called Hit Refresh. In fact, I've read it multiple times. And I want to start with this quote out of the book. Every person, organization, and every society reaches a point at which they owe it to themselves to hit refresh, to re-energize, renew, reframe, and rethink their purpose. If only it were as easy as punching that little refresh button on your browser. So, like I said, midlife crisis, reevaluating for everything. But yeah, it was not that easy. So, when I say transformation, it all starts with the mission. And the mission that was defined is also very audacious. But as opposed to that mission of a PC on every desk, which is no longer relevant because it basically came true, we needed a mission that was going to last forever. And I'll share this anecdote with you, which is quite interesting. When I started working at Microsoft, one of the things that amazed me was that every employee knows the mission by heart. And when I say every employee, I mean everyone, the engineers, the salespeople, the admin staff, even the maid. Everybody knows this mission: to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So everybody knows it. And it all starts with that mission. And that transformation that we've gone through is internal. We tend to look at it as something that the company has gone through internally, but in fact, it reflects externally. Just like when we go through a transformation internally in our lives as a person, it reflects on how we come out to the world. The same thing happened with Microsoft. So if you look at the press coverage that we got in 2012, which was not very favorable, internal competition, organizational politics, we were considered one of those companies that are very proprietary and very closed. That started changing as we started changing. And as you looked at the press coverage that we got in later years, as we were going through this transformation, it became more and more favorable. And if we look at this quote for 2018 and CNET, there's a huge change in thinking from the Gates and Ballmer areas. The company's gone through a huge change and everybody could see it. But more importantly, it reflected in the business as well. So this transformation, which I'll walk you through, that we went through internally at Microsoft, actually reflected in the stock. And you can see that line that is drawn around 2014. That's when Satya Nadella became CEO. Look what happened to the stock afterwards. In fact, it quadrupled from those days, ×4. So changing the company, changing the business, changing the products, changing the operations, and most importantly, changing the culture had an impact on how we reflected on the world, but also in our stock. So what was that change? What did we actually do? What did the company do? And how does that relate to me, an employee based out of Israel? What does that have to do with me? So let's start with the word transformation. It's a very repeated word, especially now in the COVID-19 era. And we at Microsoft, we're a technology company, and we help our customers go through digital transformation. But digital transformation is always accompanied by business transformation and cultural transformation. So when we consult our customers on their transformation, we always talk about 4 dimensions of transformation. 4. The first dimension is empowering the employees. So that's very internal, transformation with the workforce. The second dimension is optimizing operations. Again, internally, optimizing the IT, the systems, the sales, the marketing, how you work. The third dimension is engaging customers and partners. This is external, reevaluating and engaging with your external relationships, so transforming those. And the fourth is transforming your products or your offering. So those are 4 dimensions of transformation that the organization needs to go through. And when we look at Microsoft transformation, we walk the talk. We've done transformation across all of those 4 dimensions. But on our presentation today, because we're short in time and because this is N-Gage, I will just very, very briefly, maybe 2 minutes on each, talk about products, customers, and operations. And I'll really hone in and focus on the employees and the culture transformation that we've gone through. So that will be the vast majority of the second part of our session today. So let's start with products. I'm sure you've all heard of Windows and Office, and those were the traditional products that Microsoft sold to its customers. Microsoft was a software company, and the basic business was based on licensing. People paid to use our software. So obviously Microsoft was very careful about releasing that software, and it treated it as an intellectual property. It was very closed. So imagine my surprise when I was in Vegas last year. This is different times when we could still travel, And every July, we had our big annual event in Vegas. This year, we have it virtual. And this is a photo I took in the T-Mobile Arena, sitting there with 50,000 other employees from Microsoft. That's Satya Nadella on the screen, very little, you can see him far away. And right above his head on huge screens is the word open. And that word stands for open source, which means free software, software that everybody can access the code and change it as they see fit. And in fact, he was announcing the relationships and the approach that Microsoft is taking towards a more open software. And that's amazing considering the background of Microsoft and being a software company. So that's a whole transformation of the product offering from a closed software to open. And one of the implications of that change was that last year, Microsoft announced an acquisition of a company called GitHub, which is the world's leading platform for software development for open source. So imagine the closest software company in the world acquiring the most important open source platform. So we've completely transformed our products. And there's a whole presentation about this, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. But that's the first pillar. Check. Product. Second dimension is engaging customers and partners, so external relationships. Again, we see our beloved Satya speaking at an event with behind him, you see a sign that says Microsoft loves Linux. Linux, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is an operating system. In fact, it's a competing operating system to Windows, which is the Microsoft operating system. What do you mean Microsoft loves Linux? That's a very unique partnership with a competitor. And in fact, over the past few years, we've announced several very surprising partnerships, like the partnership with Amazon, with Alexa, who is one of Microsoft's larger competitors, or the partnership with PlayStation that competes with Xbox, or the partnership with Renault, which is a car company, which is a strange, you would think it's a strange relationship. Or recently, we announced a partnership with Oracle, which is one of the largest competitors in cloud. So bottom line is we are actually partnering, Microsoft is partnering with all its competitors and forging these very unique relationships. Remember when I talked about that middle life crisis and reevaluating your relationships? This is that, reevaluating the relationships with the world and understanding that there is a better together approach. So transforming the customers and partners, the external interface, check. That's dimension number 2. Dimension number 3 is optimizing operations. And that means taking a hard look at how you're actually doing things. And I can tell you from experience that the change at Microsoft from this perspective has been immense. And we won't go into all the details today, but on the right-hand screen, you see some numbers there. This is the numbers of software platforms in IT that were being used for sales, for marketing, for IT. You can see there was 8, 14, 28, 44, and 50. There was over 100 types of software that was being used, which was minimized or consolidated into less than a dozen. We've transformed our IT, our sales to data-driven decisions, our marketing to data-driven marketing operations, completely revamped everything, the operational side of how we do things. And again, separate session on that, but that is the third dimension, optimize operations, check. But the topic that I really want to talk to you about is the dimension of empowering the employees, because that's all about the cultural transformation that we've gone through. And that's about the employee experience in general and my personal experience that I will share with you today. Everybody knows this sentence, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know anybody that hasn't heard it, but it's true. You can have a great strategy in place, but if you don't change the culture, nothing's going to happen. And I think Satya had that in mind when he decided to embark on this journey of redesigning the Microsoft culture. And like a lot of companies, our culture has these pillars or priorities or principles. And these are the 5 principles that the Microsoft culture is based on: growth mindset, customer obsession, one Microsoft, diverse and inclusive, and making a difference. Now, I've worked in the high-tech industry for many years, and there's always these principles. They're hanging in the walls in the hallways, and they're very nice. When you have off-site meetings, you always talk about them, but you rarely see them become a reality. You rarely see the organization living those principles. And I think this is the first time in my 40-something years of existence that I've seen a company that truly lives those principles. And I want to give you some examples. The first one has to do with the principle of growth mindset. This is something that everybody talks about at Microsoft. We don't want to be a know-it-all. We want to be a learn-it-all. This ties back into what Andy was talking about in the earlier session, actually, of a developmental curve. So this is exactly that. Learning all the time, being in a growth mindset. So how do you take that principle and make it a reality and make it part of our lives? Well, everything at Microsoft is measured against the growth mindset. When you have evaluation conversations with your manager, we call them connects, which are yearly performance reviews. They're done using the growth mindset framework. Everything is measured against whether you've learned, whether you're willing to learn, whether you're open to learn, and the impact you're having in your growth. And not just looking at the results, which is what I was used to looking at. But more importantly, not just the conversations are based on this, but the rewards are based on this. The bonus that you get at your end of the year is reflected according to whether or not you're demonstrating a growth mindset. Now that's really walking the talk. You know, when it comes to your pocket, when it comes to your salary, if that's how you're compensated, the organization is really serious about the mindset. So that's just one example. And another good example of this growth mindset is the story of Tay. This is a story that is usually shared among Microsoft employees. And this is some story that took place a couple of years ago, where there was a team that works in AI. AI is artificial intelligence, and they wanted to try out a chatbot. And they developed this chatbot called Tay, where the purpose of the chatbot was to interact and converse in day-to-day language with people. And they thought the best platform to test this out would be Twitter. So they put this chatbot called Tay on Twitter and let Tay had conversations with everybody. Now, what happened was that a group of hackers actually forged an attack on Tay, and they engaged in conversation with him that got him talking in a very offensive way. And in fact, within 24 hours, this chatbot was saying terrible things, very offensive things that, I cannot repeat on this stage today. So Microsoft had no choice but to shut this down, take Tay off Twitter, and actually issue an official apology, which was a very inconvenient situation. Now you can imagine the team that developed Tay, how they felt with their project being displayed in that way, with Microsoft offering an apology about it. What happened, in fact, was that Satya Nadella himself, the CEO, wrote an email to the development team encouraging them to learn from this, saying, congratulations for taking this risk, and do what you need to do to learn from this moving forward, but really engaging with them and being very positive about it. So that's really showing the growth mindset that goes across Microsoft. So I'm not going to be talking about all the 5 principles today, because I want to talk to you about just the making a difference one, because that's where it comes to me personally. And that's one of the main reasons why I am working at this company. This principle talks about letting employees feel that they're actually making a difference in their own lives and in the world. And that means not being afraid to take on big challenges that have to do with the earth, with sustainability, with society, with things that are sometimes you feel like they're beyond our reach. So Microsoft encourages to take a stand and do something about it. And it's done in many different ways. One of the ways that it's done is through this hackathon, annual hackathon called 1 Week, that happens every year for a whole week. The slogan is "Don't just dream it, hack it," which is make it happen, basically. And every year, all of the employees are encouraged to take a week off and join projects that are trying to hack or make a reality of their wishes and their dreams and things that they want to make an impact with. And this 1 week hackathon happens simultaneously across the world. Teams come together, everybody can participate. It can be engineers, salespeople, marketing people, admin people, doesn't matter what role you're in. If you want to make a difference, you can participate for a whole week. And you can see in this images the passion that this evokes and the emotion that people that are getting involved have when they're hacking this. Now, this year, actually, the hackathon is happening next week. It's starting on July 27th. We're super excited. We're a couple days away. And again, this is not a standard year, so we're not congregating. We're not meeting to hack, where everything's being done virtually. The teams are working virtually. We have Teams windows simultaneously around the world. But the hackathon is happening. There's thousands of projects on different locations. And that's one of the ways where the make a difference principle is coming to play at Microsoft. The other principle, which is not on the 5 principles, but is spoken and felt in every single aspect of life at Microsoft, is empathy. If you read the Hit Refresh book by Satya, he talks about empathy all the time. He says, empathy grounds and centers me. And he says, empathy makes you a better innovator. And for me, I think that sentence of empathy grounds and centers me really hits home. And I felt that this is the reason that I was gravitated towards working here. And like in the growth mindset example that I had, where we talked about teaching it and learning it and managers talking about it, empathy is also taught at Microsoft. There's something called the empathy triangle and allyship. There's courses that are mandatory that we have to take, that managers have to take, about how to develop empathy, how to show empathy, how to be an ally to another employee. And it's really ingrained in everything we do. And in fact, if I go back to this hackathon that I was talking about, there's things called sponsored hacks, which are hacks where the management is sponsoring them. And there are the ones that are related to empathy. So there's the ability hack, which are hacks that are to help people with disabilities. There's the mental health hack, which is to help people with mental health issues. So that empathy aspect is ingrained throughout. So before I tell you my personal story, I want to start or lead in with the sentence that Satya said. He said, the last thing I wanted was for employees to think of culture as Satya's thing. I wanted them to see it as their thing. The key to culture change was individual empowerment. Now, this is a sentence that you see when I read it, I get goosebumps because it is so true. I think I don't see empathy as Satya's thing. I see it as my own thing. And I've had several experiences and examples where I could walk the talk and make it a reality within Microsoft. And the first one was last year when Microsoft launched not a competition, but sort of a challenge called Make Your Wish. And this challenge asked every employee to submit a wish that they have on this internal portal. And the wish was something that we wanted to have solved that could be solved with technology. And I've been walking around with a dream for a long time that has to do with my son. My son, Daniel, is 13 years old and he's autistic. And being autistic, he has multiple challenges, but a lot of them are around his communication with the world and his understanding the world around him. So I kind of serve as his interpreter, or I explain the world and the communication to him. I did that more when he was younger. And that can play out in various ways. For example, if he says something that is offensive and the person in front of him would make a face of an offended face or an angry face, he would not realize that. And I would have to say, Daniel, look, he's angry. Or if he's very excited about something, he's very passionate about Minecraft. He can talk for hours and hours and not stop and just talk about Minecraft. Then sometimes I'd have to tell him, take a break and pause and let the other person respond, or he's trying to say something, take a breather or let him talk. Or for example, he doesn't necessarily understand what a normative distance is between people when you're talking. He can talk and get up real close to you, like with his face. And then I'd have to tell him, Daniel, take a step back, you're too close. So my dream was to have some kind of technology gadget that would do that for him or for children like him or for people like him around the world without needing to have somebody next to them. What I imagined was some kind of glasses that you would put on that have augmented reality, so artificial intelligence-based augmented reality built into them, that would interpret the world around them and give those cues to the person wearing them. So a cue like the person is angry or the person is happy, using sentiment analysis. Or a cue like you're standing too close, take a step back. Or a cue like you're talking for one minute or 2 minutes without taking a break, pause to let somebody else talk. So those are all cues that those glasses would give the person. And so that was my dream. I put it on all in writing. I uploaded it to the Make Your Wish portal. And I was so happy and so excited to see that my wish was selected as one of the winners. And what that meant was that I actually got some significant budget and a team of engineers to develop a prototype that makes this wish come true. Now, this has nothing to do with my job. I'm a marketeer. It has nothing to do with marketing or my customers or Azure, which I work on. this is all about my personal life and my dream. And Microsoft is actually helping me make that a reality and feel like I'm making a difference. So they're still working on that prototype, which is fantastic. We're very excited to see that working soon. And that was actually the first step in one of many ways that I felt that empathy point and that making a difference principle is actually a reality for me. That first dipping my toes in the water with that Make Your Wish challenge actually brought me to set up and establish the disability group here in Israel. So I'm now leading the ERG, which is an employee resource group for people with disabilities. And Microsoft is funding this for me. I'm participating in the hackathon next week. And this time we're working on a project that will help children in wheelchairs to operate their wheelchairs in a gamification way, which is fantastic. And so that's some of the projects that I have around my passion, which is helping people with disabilities. But also Microsoft has given me a platform to make my voice heard. And we've mentioned spoken poetry before. Benny mentioned it as he was introducing me. This is something that I'm passionate about and a dream that I'm making true in the past few years. Microsoft has provided me with a platform to share my poetry, which has nothing to do with business, but I can share it internally and perform on stages within and outside of Microsoft with Microsoft sponsorship and share my poetry with the world. So I think that just exemplifies how the culture, the organizational culture of, those principles that are hanging in the hallway actually become a reality. And just to summarize everything that I've said, when Satya Nadella said in 2014, that he was going to hit refresh, that we needed to refine our purpose and our soul, that was just not words, that was reality. That was done in all 4 dimensions, transforming the product from closed to open, transforming our relationships with partners, transforming our operations, but most importantly, transforming the culture. And transforming the culture was not just left as words, as signs, as images. It reflects in our conversations with our manager. It reflects in the language. It reflects in our bonuses, and it reflects in the day-to-day life. And in my feeling, just as Ady, just as a mother of Daniel, of being able to make my wishes come true. I think, I'm biased. You can't hide it. I'm biased. I'm working for this company. But I really, truly believe that this is an example of one of the most impressive transformations that an organization has gone through. And I'm proud and happy to be part of it. And with that, I want to say goodbye. The picture on the screen is my loved son, Daniel, taking a look at the world through his very special lenses of his eyes. I'd like to say thank you now and see if there's any questions.
Ady, actually, we don't have time for questions, but I just wanted to say that I'm moved into tears.
Okay, no, I don't want you to cry, but I'm happy that I reached your heart.
No, I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm happy to cry, and it's such an inspiration to hear the story, and I wish so many people will be exposed to it. And this is such a good reason why we're recording it. So I really want to thank you for this inspiring talk, and I wish more people would learn from Microsoft, and many other companies around the world are doing the same thing to make a mind shift that is so necessary. So really, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for this opportunity.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you.
Okay, so now to something, now to